The chandelier above the dining table cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. It hung there, dripping with crystal and gold light, casting a warm glow across the long mahogany table where 31 members of the Adeyemi family sat dressed in their finest clothes. Agbadas pressed to perfection, lace blouses crisp, gold jewellery heavy around necks that were already heavy with pride. They had been told tonight was special. They had been told a man of extraordinary importance wanted to formally introduce himself. They had not been told his name. That was the first mistake. At exactly 8:04 p.m., the double doors at the far end of the private dining hall swung open without a knock, without a sound, without warning. 4 men in black suits entered first, faces unreadable, hands clasped in front of them, eyes scanning every corner of the room, the way predators scan a field. Behind them 2 more. Behind those 2, another pair. And then he walked in. He was not tall in the way that draws attention slowly. He was tall in the way that changes the air in a room. Broad-shouldered, unhurried, dressed in a dark charcoal suit with no tie. The first 2 buttons of his white shirt open, not carelessly, but deliberately, the way a man dresses who has never needed to impress anyone. His jaw was sharp. His eyes were darker than the room deserved. He was 35 years old and looked like something the world had carved out of consequence. His name was Jae-won Oh, and every person at that table would remember this night for the rest of their lives. He did not sit at the head of the table because no one had offered it to him. Instead, he walked, slowly, soundlessly, to the seat beside Mirabel Adeyemi, the woman no one at the table had bothered to look at twice all evening. She was 60 years old. She sat with her back straight, her hands folded gently in her lap, her dark skin luminous under the chandelier light. She wore a simple deep burgundy dress, no excessive jewellery, just small gold earrings shaped like teardrops. Her locks were streaked silver and pinned elegantly at the back of her head. She was the kind of beautiful that age had not diminished. It had clarified. Jae-won pulled out the chair beside her, sat down, and without a word placed his hand over hers on the table. A single quiet gesture. The room noticed immediately. Mirabel's eldest son, Chukwuemeka, 41 years old and already reaching for his wineglass, with the confidence of a man who owned every room he entered, was the first to speak. "Wait." He set the glass down slowly. Wait. He looked from Jae-won to his mother, then back. His eyes narrowed. "Mummy, what is going on here?" Mirabel opened her mouth, but her daughter Ades spoke first, sharp, fast, the way she always did when she smelled something she found offensive. "Is this—" She let out a short laugh. No. Please someone explain to me what I am seeing." Jae-won said nothing. He reached for the water glass in front of him, took one slow, deliberate sip, set it down. That stillness only made it worse. It was Uncle Donatus, 65, loud, always the self-appointed spokesman of family shame, who finally said it. Stood up from his chair, pointed one thick finger across the table, and announced to the entire room in a voice meant to humiliate, "You're marrying a 60-year-old woman?" The table erupted. Ades laughed, a cruel, glittering laugh that bounced off the crystal glasses. "This is a joke. Someone is playing a prank. Hidden camera? Where?" She looked around. Chukwuemeka's wife, Blessing, leaned over and whispered something to the aunt beside her. Both of them covered their mouths, but not their eyes. A cousin, young, reckless, drunk on palm wine and family immunity, called out from the far end of the table, "Oga, with all this money you have, you cannot find a younger woman. Why you come here to collect our old cargo?" Laughter. Open, shameless laughter. Mirabel sat very still. She did not look at the table. She looked at her hands, and something in her face, something behind the composure, behind the dignity she wore like armor, flickered. Just once, like a candle in wind. Nobody saw it, except Jae-won. He saw it, and the temperature in the room changed. He did not raise his voice. He did not stand. He simply turned his head, slowly the way a blade turns, and looked at the cousin at the far end of the table. Just looked, for 4 full seconds. The laughter stopped. Not gradually, all at once, like someone had cut a wire. Then Jae-won spoke. His voice was low, unhurried, each word placed with the precision of something that had never needed volume to be dangerous. "Say one more word about her," he said, "and I will make sure that the building your business operates from is condemned by morning. Not threatened, condemned. And that will be the kindest thing I do." He picked up his fork. "Now, shall we eat?" No one moved for 7 full seconds. Then, one by one, hands reached for cutlery, backs straightened, eyes dropped to plates. Even Uncle Donatus sat back down, slowly, quietly, like a man trying not to disturb a sleeping lion. Mirabel turned to look at Jae-won. He was already looking at her, and in that look was something no man had given her in years. Not pity, not rescue, recognition. If you enjoy emotional stories filled with shocking twists, powerful love and unforgettable moments, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this story. Now let's begin. 3 months before that dinner, Mirabel Adeyemi was invisible. Not the poetic kind of invisible, not the woman who fades gracefully into the background of her own story. The real kind, the grinding, humiliating, soul-wearing kind that happens when the people who are supposed to love you most look through you like glass. She had raised 3 children in a house in Lagos that was never quite big enough and never quite quiet enough. She had worked 31 years as a secondary school teacher, biology and English, staying late to mark scripts by lamplight when the power went out, spending her own salary on chalk and notebooks when the government forgot to supply them, giving back to children the world had not yet given up on. She had buried a husband who loved her deeply but died too soon. A cardiac arrest, at 54, 6 years ago, on a Wednesday morning when she was making egusi soup in the kitchen and didn't know the world was ending. She had done everything right, and for all of it she had received, in the currency of her family's appreciation, almost nothing. After her husband died, the family had moved through his property like water through sand. Her brother-in-law had borrowed the family car and never returned it. The rental apartment her husband had owned in Surulere was quietly transferred to Chukwuemeka's name for management purposes. Her jewellery, pieces her husband had bought her over 30 years, disappeared one item at a time during the months of mourning when relatives filled the house and grief made her trust everyone. She said nothing. That was the thing about Mirabel. She said nothing. Not because she was weak, but because she believed, bone deep, that peace was more valuable than war. That dignity was worth more than victory. That there were battles you fought and battles you simply outlived. She moved into a small apartment in Yaba. She continued tutoring students and volunteering at the orphanage. She prayed in the mornings with the kind of faith that does not require an audience. She cooked elaborate meals on Sunday and ate them alone. She called her children every week. They answered sometimes. At 60, she had arrived at the place society builds for women like her, the quiet, apologetic margins. She was expected to be grateful for visits, expected to ask permission before attending family events, expected to smile warmly when her grandchildren didn't remember her name, and expected to pretend that didn't hollow her out. She was not dying, but she was disappearing. And then one Thursday afternoon she met Jae-won Oh. It happened because of a stranger's umbrella. The rain in Lagos had a particular cruelty in October, sudden, vertical, indifferent to plans. Mirabel had just left the pharmacy on Awolowo Road when the sky opened. She ducked under the narrow overhang of a closed shopfront, pulling her bag against her chest, scanning the street for an Okada or a taxi that wasn't already full. The man standing 2 feet away from her didn't seem to notice the rain. He was on the phone, speaking in Korean, his voice quiet and flat and utterly absorbed. He wore no expression. He had no umbrella. His suit jacket, clearly expensive, clearly foreign, was getting soaked, and he didn't appear to care. Around him, at a respectful distance that looked almost practiced, stood two large men in black. They noticed the rain. They did not move. Mirabel watched the man for a moment. Then, without overthinking it, because overthinking was not in her nature, she reached into her bag, pulled out the folding umbrella she always carried, and held it out over him. Not over herself. Over him. He stopped talking mid-sentence, looked at her. She smiled, not the nervous social smile she had learned to perform for people who made her uncomfortable, the real one. The one that reached her eyes and meant nothing except warmth. "You're getting wet," she said simply. He looked at the umbrella, then at her, then at the rain. Then something happened in his face that his own bodyguards had never seen in 4 years of service. He looked uncertain. "I have people who—" he began. "Your people are also getting wet," she said pleasantly, and they looked too proud to admit it. One of the bodyguards coughed. Jae-won Oh stared at this woman, this small schoolteacher, utterly unintimidated woman. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he had absolutely no idea what to do. He had never had that problem before. He did the only thing that made sense. He stood under her umbrella. They stood together in the rain for 11 minutes, shoulder to shoulder under the small canopy of blue nylon, while the water thundered around them and the bodyguards got soaked. He did not go back to his phone call. She did not fill the silence with nervous chatter. They simply stood there, two strangers sharing shelter, and somehow, in a way neither of them could have explained, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Before a taxi finally appeared, he turned to her. "My name is Jae-won." "Mirabel," she said. "Thank you, Mirabel." "It was just an umbrella," she told him. He looked at her one more time. "No," he said quietly. "It wasn't." And then he was gone. What Mirabel did not know, could not have known standing under that blue umbrella, was that Jae-won Oh was not simply a wealthy businessman visiting Lagos. He was the head of the Oh Syndicate, established by his grandfather in post-war Seoul and built into an empire that stretched across South Korea, Japan, Singapore, and into the shadow economies of Southeast Asia. The syndicate controlled shipping routes, real estate monopolies, private security contracts, and the kind of financial instruments that governments preferred not to examine too closely. At 35, Jae-won had inherited the empire at 28, after his father's death. Not from illness, but from an internal betrayal that had nearly destroyed the entire organization. He had survived it. More than survived it. He had rebuilt the syndicate from the inside out, eliminated the betrayers with a precision that became legend, and expanded into legitimate infrastructure in ways that made him untouchable by law and feared by every criminal organization that operated within his territory. He came to Lagos for a port acquisition deal. He stayed because he could not stop thinking about an umbrella. He had his people locate her within 48 hours. Not to surveil her. Or not only that, but because Jae-won Oh had not lived to 35 by ignoring things that unsettled him, and she unsettled him in a way he needed to understand. What his people reported back was not what he expected. She had recently retired after 31 years as a secondary school teacher, widowed, lived alone in a modest apartment in Yaba, had 3 adult children who called him frequently, attended a Baptist church on Sunday mornings, grew tomatoes on her balcony, volunteered on Wednesday afternoons at an orphanage near Oshodi, not for recognition, but because she had done it for 15 years and saw no reason to stop. No agenda, no wealth, no network. Just a woman who gave her umbrella to a stranger in the rain. Jae-won read the report 3 times. Then he did something his entire organization had never seen him do. He asked for an introduction. Their second meeting was at a quiet restaurant on Victoria Island. His choice, though he had his assistant frame it as a coincidence so carefully that Mirabel spent the first 20 minutes genuinely believing it was one. By the time she realised it wasn't, she had already laughed 3 times and finished half her jollof rice. "You arranged this," she said. It was not a question. Jae-won looked at her across the table. He had the look of a man deciding whether to lie, and finding, unusually, that he did not want to. "Yes," he said. "Why?" "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since Thursday." Mirabel set down her fork. "Jae-won," she said patiently, "I am 60 years old." "I know. You are, what, 30-something? 35. She looked at him for a long moment. There was no flattery in his face, no performative charm. Just that dark, direct gaze, honest in a way that disarmed her, because she had learned to expect dishonesty from people who smiled too much, and this man barely smiled at all. "You should find someone your own age," she told him, not unkindly. "I have met many people my own age," he said. "They have not made me feel what standing under an umbrella with you for 11 minutes made me feel." And what was that? He thought about it, actually thought about it, in the way people rarely do when they are trying to impress someone. "Calm," he said at last. "I felt calm." Mirabel was quiet for a moment. The restaurant hummed softly around them. Somewhere a child laughed. "That is either the saddest or the most beautiful thing anyone has said to me in years," she told him. "Which is it?" She picked up her fork again. "I haven't decided yet." He came back. That was the thing no one in his world could believe when they eventually found out. Jae-won. Oh, who had never pursued anything in his personal life with patience, came back. Again and again, he had business in Lagos, and then somehow he had business in Lagos again, and then he was creating business in Lagos, and everyone around him was too afraid to say what they all knew. He came back for her. They met for coffee, for long walks along the marina in the quiet of early morning when the city had not yet decided to be itself. He drove with her to the orphanage on a Wednesday and sat in a plastic chair for 2 hours watching her teach children how to read, and something in his chest did something it had not done in a decade. She asked him questions no one asked him, not about his wealth or his power or his plans. She asked him about his grandmother, about the first meal he ever cooked, about whether he had ever been afraid. He told her things he had told no one. She listened the way rivers listen, not collecting, just carrying. He told her about the night his father died, about the weight of an empire placed on shoulders that were still learning what shoulders were for, about the loneliness that lived at the center of absolute power like a stone you couldn't move. She did not give him advice. She did not try to fix it. She just placed her hand on his and said, "You have been carrying that alone for a long time." It was, somehow, exactly what he needed to hear. By the 6th week, he knew. By the 8th week, he told her, "I want to marry you, Mirabel." They were on the balcony of his penthouse suite. The city of Lagos spread below them like a field of lights, warm wind coming off the ocean. Mirabel turned to look at him. For a long time, she said nothing. "Jae-won," she began, "I know what you are going to say. Then you know I will say it anyway." She folded her hands in her lap. "I am not a project. I am not someone you rescue because you feel something tender for me. I am not a symbol of your goodness. I am a woman with a past, with grief in me that didn't finish, with children who barely call, with wrinkles and grey hair and 60 years of life that bent me in places I have not finished straightening." "I know," he said. "And you still—" "All of that," he said quietly, "is precisely why." Mirabel looked at him for a very long time. "I need to think," she said finally. "Take all the time you need." She nodded, looked back at the city. "Jae-won." "Yes. Are you afraid of my family?" Something shifted in his face. Not quite a smile, something more dangerous. "No," he said. She nodded once more. "Good," she said, because they are going to be terrible. She had underestimated terrible. Chukwuemeka had organized the family dinner himself, framing it to the relatives as a celebration, never specifying what kind, pulling in aunts and uncles and cousins from 3 states who smelled an occasion and came dressed for importance. He had booked the private dining room at the Eco Hotel, not because he wanted to honor his mother, but because he wanted an audience for whatever confrontation he had already planned. He had known, from the moment Mirabel told him she was seeing someone, that something was wrong. No, not wrong. Embarrassing. His mother, 60 years old, greying, retired, dating. In Lagos society, where a man's respectability was measured in part by the discretion of his female relatives, the idea of his mother with a man made his jaw tighten in a way he didn't examine too closely. He had told himself it was concern. He had told himself he was protecting her from someone who wanted to exploit her. He had not told himself the truth, which was simpler and uglier. He was ashamed. When Jae-won walked through those double doors and sat beside Mirabel and placed his hand over hers, Chukwuemeka had felt something crack inside him. Not grief, rage. And then Jae-won had spoken, one more word about her. And Chukwuemeka had felt something else crack. Fear. The dinner passed in a silence so brittle you could have shattered it by thinking too hard. Forks scraped plates. Wine was poured and drunk quickly. No one made a toast. Uncle Donatus, who had a comment for everything, studied his fried plantain with the intensity of a man discovering a new religion. Mirabel ate slowly, calmly, with the dignity of a woman who had decided that tonight she would not flinch. Jae-won barely ate. He watched the room. He watched the room the way a man watches a room when he owns it, even when he doesn't. When dessert was cleared, Chukwuemeka finally found his voice. "Sir," he said, setting his napkin on the table, "with all due respect, what exactly are your intentions toward my mother?" Jae-won turned to look at him. The pause lasted long enough to be architectural. "I intend to marry her," he said. The table braced itself. Ada's made a sound like something breaking. "Mummy, please tell him. Tell him this is not Aday's." Mirabel's voice was soft and final as a closed door. "But Mummy." "Aday's." The name landed for the second time like a full stop. Chukwuemeka leaned forward. "Sir, with respect, my mother is 60 years old. You are obviously a much younger man. You must understand why we find this irregular." "I understand you find it uncomfortable," Jae-won said. "I did not come here to make you comfortable." "And what did you come here for?" "Courtesy," Jae-won said. "To inform you, not to ask permission." He looked around the table slowly, making eye contact with each face in turn, until those faces looked away. "Your mother is the most remarkable woman I have met in my life. She is kind in a way that costs her something. She is strong in a way she has never once shown off. She has given 30 years of herself to her family and her students and strangers in the rain, and in return, she eats alone on Sundays." The table went very still. "I am not here to ask if you approve of me. I am here because she asked me to try, because she still loves you despite everything you have cost her." He straightened his jacket. "I suggest you consider what that is worth." No one spoke. Mirabel looked at her hands, and this time, what flickered in her face was not the wounded candle from before. It was a light turning on. The family did not accept it gracefully. What followed the dinner was not reconciliation. It was war waged in whispers, in phone calls between relatives, in carefully worded text messages that Mirabel sometimes saw and sometimes did not, and in the particular cruelty of being discussed as a problem to be solved. Chukwuemeka called his mother twice a week now, more than he had in the previous year, but the calls were investigations disguised as concern. "Who is he really, Mummy? What does he want? Have you checked his background? Mummy, at your age, you cannot be naive. At your age, 3 words that arrived like an open hand. Mirabel bore it with the grace she had always worn, but something had shifted in her. A resolve. As if Jae-won's words at that dinner table had reached into the place she had been slowly hollowing out for herself and placed something solid back inside. She did not argue with Chukwuemeka. She did not justify herself to Adai's. She did not respond to the cousin who posted an ambiguous but pointed comment on family WhatsApp about older women who forget their dignity. Instead, she packed a small bag and accepted Jae-won's invitation to spend a week in Seoul. Seoul was another universe, not because of the city, which was extraordinary, a dense, electric, beautiful thing that moved with the precision of a watch, but because of who she was inside it. In Lagos, Mirabel was background. In Seoul, at Jae-won's side, she was, without understanding why at first, seen. His people treated her with a careful, almost formal respect. His penthouse apartment in Gangnam was 52 floors above the city, glass and steel and impossibly quiet, filled with art she recognized and books she wanted to read. He had stocked the kitchen with suya spices and stockfish and palm oil and 3 different types of Nigerian pepper. She stood in front of that pantry shelf for a full minute before she trusted herself to speak. "You did this," she said when he came into the kitchen. "My assistant did research," he said simply. She turned around. Her eyes were bright. Jae-won. "Yes. Nobody has done anything like this for me in a very long time." He looked at her steadily. "Get used to it," he said. She cooked for him that evening. A proper egusi soup, the kitchen filling with the deep, warm smell of crayfish and palm oil and ground melon seeds. And he sat at the kitchen island and watched her with the expression of someone watching something precious and common happening, and being struck completely by the preciousness of it. "Tell me about your husband," he said. She didn't stop stirring. "Emeka was a good man, a gentleman. He used to sing in the shower, badly, always badly, and he thought it was hilarious. He loved me for exactly who I was, never once asked me to be smaller." She paused. "He died before I was ready, but I'm not sure I would ever have been ready." "Do you still miss him?" "Every Sunday," she said, "not with the sharp pain anymore, the dull kind, the kind that means he was real." Jae-won was quiet. "Do you miss your father?" she asked. A long silence. "I miss who he was before the empire got into him," Jae-won said finally. "Power changes people. I have tried very hard to make sure it does not change me. I am not always successful." Mirabel turned to look at him. "You know what tells me you are still good," she said. "What?" "You worry about it," she said. "Truly changed men don't." He stared at her. Then, for the first time in their entire acquaintance, Jae-won Oh smiled, not the polite, controlled expression he used for boardrooms and negotiations. A real smile, quiet, a little disbelieving, like something that surprised itself into existing. Mirabel saw it and stored it like a treasure. They announced the engagement formally in November. The family's response was not silence this time. It was coordinated. Chukwuemeka flew to Seoul, something he had never done, had not even owned a valid passport for, and arrived at Jae-won's building with 2 lawyers and a prepared document. A petition, essentially, requesting that Mirabel undergo psychological evaluation before any legal union could proceed. The implication was clear and savage. Only a woman who was not thinking clearly could possibly want this. Jae-won's security team intercepted him at the lobby. Chukwuemeka sat in a waiting room for 45 minutes before anyone spoke to him. Then one of Jae-won's senior executives, a small, precise Korean woman who radiated the specific calm of someone who had seen far worse, told him that Mr. Oh would not be receiving him today and that the document he had brought would be reviewed by Mr. Oh's legal team and responded to accordingly. He was escorted out, but someone leaked the story to a Lagos gossip blog. 60-year-old Nigerian woman, snares Korean billionaire, family questions, her sanity. The headline was a knife. Mirabel read it on a Tuesday morning, sitting at the kitchen island with her tea, and for a moment she did not move, just read it. Once, twice. Her hand was perfectly still around the mug. Jae-won came in, saw her face and crossed the room in 4 steps. Mirabel, she looked up. Her eyes were dry, but something behind them was not. They think I am crazy, she said quietly. My own children think I have lost my mind. He sat beside her. They are afraid, he said. Not of me, of losing control of you becoming something that belongs to itself. She looked at him. Is that what I am doing? Yes, he said, and it is the most remarkable thing I have ever watched happen. She looked back at the screen. I want to respond, she said. How? She set her mug down. I want to do an interview. He raised an eyebrow. Not a gossip blog, she said. A real one. I want to sit in front of a camera and be exactly who I am and let people see that I have not lost my mind, that I am a woman who has earned the right to her own happiness. Jae-won looked at her for a long moment. Whatever you want, he said. The interview aired 3 weeks later on a respected Pan-African media platform. Mirabel sat in a cream dress, silver locks pinned neatly, hands folded, completely composed, and answered every question with the clarity and warmth of a woman who had nothing to prove and had decided to prove it anyway. When asked if she believed the age gap was an issue, she said, every relationship has gaps. Age, culture, history, language. Life is a collection of gaps that love either crosses or doesn't. Jae-won and I do not pretend there are no differences. We sit inside the differences and find each other anyway. When asked what she would say to people who doubted her mental clarity, she tilted her head slightly and smiled. I taught biology for 31 years, she said. I understand the human body better than most. My mind is quite fine, thank you. The clip ran to 4 million views by morning. Jae-won watched it in his office and felt something he had not felt in 35 years. He felt proud of someone. It was his head of security, Park Ji-hoon, who brought him the information in December. Not about Mirabel, about Chukwuemeka. Jae-won's team had done a routine background sweep of all immediate family members, standard protocol when a marriage was approaching. What they found in Chukwuemeka's financial records was not routine. The rental property in Surulere, the family car, 2 gold chains and a diamond bracelet that had belonged to Mirabel and been reported stolen during a break-in 3 years ago. A break-in that had never been independently investigated, that the police had dismissed in 2 days. None of it had been stolen. All of it had been quietly, methodically transferred, sold, or absorbed by her son. Jae-won read the report once and set it on his desk. He sat very still for a long time. Then he called Mirabel. She arrived at his office an hour later, sat across from him and read the report herself. He watched her face as she read, watched it move through something complex and private. Confusion, then recognition, then a grief so specific and deep it had no expression, only a stillness. When she finished, she set the papers down. She did not cry. I suspected, she said. Her voice was very quiet. After the car, I suspected, but I told myself a mother is not supposed to think that about her child. Mirabel, I want you to leave it, she said. He went still. What? I want you to leave it alone. I don't want him prosecuted. I don't want it exposed. She looked at him. He is still my son. Whatever he did, I will not take a father from his children to prove a point. Jae-won looked at her for a long, careful moment. You are a better person than I will ever be, he said. No, she said. I am just a mother. She paused. But I want him to know that I know. I want to tell him myself. The conversation between Mirabel and Chukwuemeka happened in January, in the small apartment in Yaba, where she had lived alone for 6 years. She made him tea. She sat across from him at the kitchen table and told him calmly and completely what she knew. He denied it for 3 minutes. Then he collapsed. Not physically. Something internal. The scaffolding of self-justification giving way all at once. He put his face in his hands. And then Chukwuemeka, 41 years old, father of two, man who had moved through the world like he owned it, wept in his mother's kitchen like a child who had broken something irreplaceable. I thought, he started, after Papa died, the money was, we needed Mummy. I thought I was managing it. You took what was mine, she said, and you told yourself it was management. He had no answer. I am not going to punish you, she said. I am going to forgive you. But Amika. She used his name, his full first name, the one she had only ever used in Gravity. You do not get to call my happiness a symptom of madness when your hands are not clean. You do not get to question my mind when you have been stealing from mine. The silence in that kitchen was enormous. He nodded once. She reached across the table and put her hand over his, the way she had always done when he was small and frightened and needed to remember she was there. You are still my son, she said. Come to the wedding. The wedding was held in March, not in Lagos, not in Seoul, in both. First, a traditional engagement in Lagos, attended by the family and Mirabel's friends and former students who came in buses from 3 states. Then a quiet civil ceremony in Seoul, with only Ji-hoon as witness, in a registry office overlooking the Han River on a cold, clear morning. The Lagos ceremony was the one that mattered publicly. Mirabel wore chorale, deep, rich, Nigerian chorale, and Jae-won wore a traditional agbada in dark green and gold that he had been fitted for twice, and practiced moving in because he was not, he told Mirabel solemnly, going to trip at his own wedding. She had laughed. Properly. The laugh that came from deep inside her. The family came. All of them. Uncle Donatus came and sat in the second row and did not say a word out of turn. Adaez came, tight-faced at first, and then, watching her mother walk in, seeing the way Jae-won's entire body changed when Mirabel entered the room, seeing the way he looked at her like she was the only fixed point in the universe. Something in Adaez's chest did something quiet and complicated that would take her months to fully understand. Chukwuemeka sat in the front row. He did not smile immediately, but he did not look away. When Mirabel reached the front of the room, Jae-won stepped forward. He took her hands. He looked at her, in front of every person who had ever dismissed her, in front of everyone who had ever said at your age, in front of everyone who had laughed in that hotel dining room. And he said his vows in both English and Yoruba, because he had learned 16 phrases specifically for this moment and practiced them until they were his. The room went silent in the way rooms go silent when they are witnessing something real. When he said, I choose you, Mirabel, not despite who you are, but because of exactly who you are, there were tears in the room. Several people who had mocked this union found themselves, without entirely understanding why, undone. But it was his final line that broke the room open. He turned slightly so that the words were not just for Mirabel, but for the family assembled behind her. 60 years, he said, built the woman I am marrying. I am the luckiest man in this room, and I know it. I suggest you know it too. Chukwuemeka pressed his lips together. He looked at his mother. She was looking at Jae-won with an expression Chukwuemeka had not seen on her face since his father was alive. Not the gentle contentment, the full, whole, unguarded joy, the kind you cannot perform, cannot fake, cannot produce from anything except truth. He bowed his head and cried. In the year that followed, things shifted in the quiet ways that matter. Adaez called more, not because she was required to, but because she had started to understand that her mother was not a satellite in orbit around the family. She was a son who had spent decades being treated like a moon. The realization arrived slowly and did not feel good, and was the beginning of something better. Uncle Donatus never spoke disparagingly about Mirabel again. Whether from fear or shame or some late-arriving wisdom, no one could say. But his silence on the matter was total and permanent. Chukwuemeka returned everything he could. It was never spoken of publicly. Between mother and son, it was a slow and unglamorous thing. The kind of repair that looks like tea at the kitchen table and phone calls that last too long and sitting together in the same room without needing to fill it. Mirabel never returned to invisibility. She began writing a memoir, at first just for herself, about the years of quiet and what they had cost her and what they had taught her. Jae-won read every chapter. He told her it should be published. She told him he was biased. He told her that did not make him wrong. The book was published in 18 months. It was called Still Water. It sold in 12 countries. It was translated into Korean, and Jae-won read it in his language and called her afterward and was quiet for a moment on the phone. "You have been carrying this for so long," he said. "I know," she said, "but I put it down now." As for Jae-won, he did not stop being who he was. The syndicate did not dissolve because he fell in love. Power did not soften into sentiment. He remained what he was: formidable, feared, precise, and dangerous in the specific ways that dangerous men are dangerous. But there was a room in his penthouse in Seoul, the room with the biggest windows, the one that faced the sunrise, that belonged entirely to Mirabel. She grew things in it. Plants she brought from Lagos, seedlings she cultivated in mismatched pots, tomatoes that climbed the window glass and turned red in the Korean morning light. The most powerful criminal in Asia watered them when she wasn't there. His security team never spoke of this. It was the most terrifying thing they had ever seen him do. She was sitting in that room on a morning in late spring when he found her. She was reading, one leg tucked beneath her, silver locks loose around her shoulders, a cup of tea going cold on the windowsill. The sun was fully up. The city was already moving below them. He stood in the doorway. She looked up. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "I just wanted to see you." She smiled. The real one. The one she had been giving strangers in the rain before she ever knew him. The one that was simply completely entirely herself. "Come in then," she said. He crossed the room. He sat beside her. And the city below them moved in the ordinary miracle of its own life, and the tomatoes reached toward the glass, and Mirabel Adeyemi, 61 years old now, still graceful, still soft-spoken, still emotionally strong, still deeply compassionate, no longer invisible, no longer apologetic, no longer small, turned the page. Some people spend a lifetime waiting to be seen. Mirabel waited 60 years. It was worth every lonely, painful, invisible day. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded. It is never too late to be loved the way you deserve. Like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. Which moment hit you the hardest?